So the session is being recorded now, and it leaves me with nothing more than delighted to be able to welcome Matthew and David. Apologies for the delay in coming into the room this morning. We did have some problems getting the slides to look good, so they're not as good as we would like them to be, just purely in relation to some of the fonts and so on. And the reason you were late in was because I couldn't get them to work properly. So we're late starting because of me and me wanting to make things look good. But I will hand over to you, Matthew and David, and delighted to welcome you to the session today.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and just a huge thank you for everybody here giving up their time to come and listen to our talk today. It's been just a mind-blowing last few months with artificial intelligence and how we can support that in the learning and development industry. And I think this continual development as well, and about how we've put this together, it's been an epiphany. You know, a few weeks back when we were preparing for this, it's easy to get distracted by AI because it comes at such a pace. It's boom, 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 something new, something new, something new. And even this morning, DALL-E 3 announced its newest piece of programming. And I think you become familiar and you become comfortable with something where you think you do, and then something new comes along. And we're still at that infancy phase. We're still at that stage of, we can create content, we can understand it, but really, how do we leverage that power of AI, especially when we're trying to drive success? Because I think, and this is me personally, and I don't know about you guys in the audience, but I'm constantly thinking, how am I using AI? Not how is the AI supporting the learner? And I think that is going to be the core message throughout this presentation for the next 40 minutes or so. Of course, my name's Matthew Kesby. I'm a learning designer at Omniplex Learning. I've been at the company for 3 years now. I've got a background in education, and AI was always something that I always thought it's something to play around with. It's something to have fun with, and I still believe that. But I'll pass you over to David, who will introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm David Beatty. I'm the development director at Omniplex Learning, which means I run our engineering team. I have a computer science background, and I also took a course on building large language models like ChatGPT, which Matthew's going to be talking you through today. I'll pass over to him.
So, thanks, David. So that is a reminder, anything technical, David's here to answer. If you've got some of those, for example, how does AI work? It's not something that I'm 100% comfortable with. It's something that I know how to use, but it doesn't mean I understand it. It's in a way, it's how I feel, if I'm trying to explain to my nan, how does Google work? You type something in and you get something back. But ultimately, we're here to drive that conversation forward. I will do a shout out. Lena, who was originally going to be presenting this, has COVID and is unfortunately able to present and barely has a voice. So a shout out of those who know Lena and are familiar with her. I can't take credit for what you're going to hear because she put in so much work and so much effort. But I promise to make the team proud who put this put this together, and also hopefully you guys come away with something really really thought provoking as well. So what are we going to cover today? Essentially, we're looking at what is AI. We're going to be looking at this from a really bare bones perspective. Now, it's not consistently running throughout as a introductory course. I think it's important to define what AI actually is. We're going to be looking at how we can use generative AI within L&D as well. And we're going to be doing that alongside looking at exploration of content creation tools, and we'll have some examples of those today. Essentially AI is a system, and it's designed to perform tasks for us. It uses algorithms and it pulls data, and it uses applications which are diverse and include virtual assistants, such as we've got nowadays self-driving cars, recommendation systems, and more. Generative AI as well is a type of artificial intelligence that can create new content, such as text, imagery, music. It's seen across learning platforms as well, and it's generating outputs that can mimic that human intellect as well. But it's still reliant on prompts. And then finally, exploring introductory uses of AI tools and how I use it in my day-to-day practice. And if you've got anything as well to share, and you want to ask questions, feel free to throw them in, or if you've got insights about how you're using AI. So I'm going to open up with the first question. What are our fears surrounding AI?
Thank you for this, Matt. Thank you. So really keen to find out, people here, what your fears are around AI. If you can put them in the box underneath the text there. So what are our fears surrounding AI? And I see Liam's put in the other chat, losing our jobs. Keena has said, embedding existing biases. There's an interesting test you can do, Keena. I asked ChatGPT, name 10 philosophers some months ago, and it came up with exclusively white men. I asked it again a couple of weeks ago, name 10 philosophers, and it came up with a mix. So there is an interesting thought about bias. What else are people saying? Reliability of data. We're not learning about it fast enough. Accuracy, information security, data loss. It will do something I can't undo. That's a really interesting comment, Rose. We've got Sal in the other chat talking about reliable sources of information and copyright. Copyright's an interesting thing. But what are your thoughts on some of these comments, Matt?
This is the thing. I remember following the Learning Tech this year, and there were a number of sessions from the conference about AI, and there was this immediacy of fear surrounding it's going to take our jobs. It's going to change industry, and of course it's going to change the industry. It's one of those things that I think the dust still hasn't settled with AI. We still don't know where the outcomes lie, where the fears essentially lie as well. And you know, I was browsing the news this morning, and there's fear around the regulation of AI. And now we're not here to talk about regulation and copyright and the law surrounding artificial intelligence, but it is something to be mindful of. It's something for us to be aware of. We don't understand AI. We just are starting to learn how to use it. And I've seen a comment there. We're rushing into it blindly and trying to jump the gun. Where there's inaccuracy, and I think all of those things are true. But I think if we're intelligent and respectful of a software that we're starting to comprehend, then we can actually start to understand its limitations and its benefits.
Data's coming across as a key comment on a number of these. The safety of data. But I also like the comment like Mark, for example, major opportunity, and actually think of it from an opportunity perspective. I know we've asked the question around fears, but it's good to see somebody identifying some positives there as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, the positives, there are certainly, loads and loads of positives, and we will explore them. I like leading a question with fears, because I think the fears allow us to understand where we sit comfortably with moving forward. I think if we can identify, it's similar to doing a SWOT analysis. You identify a weakness, but how can we then turn that into an opportunity? It's about being reactive. It's about being proactive, not reactive with AI. Yeah. And it's just as we start to understand something, it will change again anyway. It's just the nature of AI at the moment.
Yeah. And again, interesting comment from Kevin. AI doesn't think like I would, and so actually it was limited in what it could do. And the comment I really like is one from Liam here. So over-reliance causing a lack of creativity and identity, which I think is really interesting. The idea of, well, we rely on it to do the interesting stuff when actually we could be using it to do the boring stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I think in my initial sort of exploration phase of AI, and I'm still exploring it, and I'm still learning and reflecting on what AI can do, I think that general fear was, and coming from my job is all about writing content and coming up with ideas and ideation and curation. It was, well, I don't need to think anymore. I don't need to be creative anymore. And it's not just limited, obviously, to text, but it's also limited. It's there for video and image. And I think there are ways in which we can use it to support that. It just allows us to free up the free time. And we'll go into that from a learning and development perspective very shortly.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Really useful. If you want to go back and look at the comments, you can go back through the recording of the session, which, like we said, will be available for next week, or potentially tomorrow, sorry. Thank you, Matthew. I'll hand back over to you.
No, thank you, everyone, as well, for those comments. I think it's just mind-blowing the amount of questions that we get and the conversation and the converse that we have with regards to AI. But it's nothing new. It's nothing unique. We've had AI in our day-to-day lives for years now, and you can see some logos on screen, ones that we're incredibly familiar with. And I always liken it to an analogy which I heard about when the dawning of mobile phone technology and internet came into existence. How is that going to change our lives? How is that going to change the learning and development industry? And mobile learning was something that shot up at the point of kind of mobile learning becoming a thing. And I did a small section at LT about M-learning and mobile learning in the early 2000s. And that was a big disruptor, but AI is taking that place. And, we can look at Spotify, and, I'm a massive, music fan and movie fan, and, Netflix can pull out algorithms based on recommendations. Oh, you've watched such and such. Well, how about this? And sometimes it hits the mark, and sometimes it doesn't know what it's talking about. But it's trying its best. And I liked recently as well, and I'm not sure if we've got many users of Spotify here, but there's the new AI DJ, which is starting to blend in AI algorithmic recommendations with human sounding DJ voice. It's starting to blend, and it's starting to become almost a social interaction, this use of AI, from using Google Maps to, it recommends where you go often. It kind of says, I don't even need to anymore in the morning when I get into the car. It knows that I'm getting in the car at 8 o'clock, I'm going to work. And it doesn't even give me a chance. It's an interesting perspective about social media and personalizing your feed and suggesting people you might know. But we need to stop and think, what AI am I familiar with in everyday life? It's interesting. AI is all around us, and it happens behind the scenes so much that technology we use in and out of work is becoming a natural part of our home life as well. But what I'd like to talk more specifically is in particular generative AI, and ways in which we can use this in our day-to-day L&D profession. Now, obviously, with generative AI, we can focus this predominantly on text-based generative AI, but we are going to look today about image and video and audio as well, and hopefully we can start underpinning that. Yes, there is a lot out there, but it's really vital to understand what we can do with it for the benefit of our learners, for the benefit of those who are absorbing the information that we are trying to create. Essentially, it's there and it's designed to generate new and existing content based on patterns and knowledge. And we're here to talk about how many so many people aren't as well using it. Not many people are using it because they are fearful of it. And I think there is genuinely a fear of the unknown. And in conversations that I've had with others in a variety of fields, from L&D to data analytics, as well to conversations with friends and family, it's becoming a conversational piece. It's that fear of the unknown, and it's instinct, it's human instinct. And just drawing on a little bit of kind of like human biology as well, it's how our amygdala works. It's that fight or flight. We see something new that we're not familiar with, and we get scared of it. And we're seeing this with AI. We're seeing those who are willing to try and experiment, but we're also, we don't understand it yet. We are cautious, but we're slowing down, collecting our knowledge. Now, I mentioned slowing down there, but also this morning, The Guardian reported that there's an AI-focused tech firms are locked in a race to the bottom. It's become a new wave arms race. It's continuous, it's evolving. There's no slowing down. But what we need to do is actually still think, well, what is our general outcome? So disadvantages, of course, being the ever pessimist, we started with fear. I'm going to start with disadvantages because I'd like to pick us back up to some of those benefits as well. And we've heard some of these in those questions from the audience, bias and fairness issues, over-reliance and skill loss, misleading and hallucinogenic information as well, copywriting, ethical issues and risks. They're all vital. And there's probably so many more out there that we've not yet discovered or not really thought about. It's becoming this continual evolution of identifying disadvantage, but disadvantages lead to succinct and clear benefits as well. And just to pick us back up, those benefits, from a company-wide perspective, it saves us time and it saves us money. It saves us knowledgeable, collection of information. It's affordable, it's easy to implement. It increases productivity and it's enhanced creativity. Now, I know that there were comments surrounding the issues of, does it truly enhance creativity? Surely it makes us a bit lazier. I'm going to show some examples shortly about how we can implement that into the L&D practice. But I do think it's worth noting those benefits far, for me at the moment, personally, you might have a different experience, outweigh those disadvantages yet from an L&D perspective. And the reason it's booming is because of the heaps of benefits that it seems to bring. We just need to know where we can apply those benefits to our learners. It's still far from perfect. This list of benefits and disadvantages could change tomorrow. It could change straight after this call. And just to kind of like to reiterate, well, the DALI 3 announcement this morning is just how responsive and how immediate AI is within our field. And there are limits. We need to discuss those as well. So when we look at generative AI in the learning and development industry, as you can see on screen, there's lots of different ways in which we can start pulling some of this, those benefits together, like content generation, for example. It can create training materials, agendas, presentation, course content, and it can generate text and different forms of multimedia. That has been so vital in my role, where clients want content quickly and they want it immediately. That is there to support that. It doesn't understand, AI doesn't understand the content, but it can understand our prompts and it can understand our questions that we give it. We look at as well, generative AI can help continuous learning. So for example, generating bite-sized learning content, tips, nudges, refreshers, nano learning. It's quick, it's reflective. It allows me, without being in a room full of people that could take a day, to brainstorm ideas and to think about ways forward and about how we can implement it. And then personalized learning as well. By analyzing individual learning data, generative AI can generate personalized learning paths and recommendations, and it can create customized quizzes and examples. There are so many ways that we can apply it, especially, in these early instances, that we need to slow down. We need to think what's there, and we need to be considerate of that. I just wanted to show you this snapshot. This is a very small portion of what is out there, and it's growing continually. It's something that we need to be mindful of. It moves at a fast pace, but essentially, it's always growing. And what works for me doesn't work for you, won't work for someone I'm working with, someone in my team. Andrew and I were talking yesterday, and ChatGPT is my go-to. He's a Google Bard fan. It feels like there's almost becoming this divide of, I support Chelsea, well, you support Arsenal. I support Luton, you support Watford. It's a balance of competition. Who's going to be the best? Who's going to be the fastest? Who's going to be the most accurate? And sure, competition is great, but if we're not slowing down and we're not pausing, and they announced as well that they're not going to be slowing down, they're not going to be pausing this development cycle of AI, that it continually moves forward. Which leads us on to ChatGPT. Now, I do apologize if you're not familiar with ChatGPT, and hopefully, some of you out there are. And if you do use something similar, we're going to try and blend the two together of generative AI versus text-based AI versus something else. But essentially, what we're here to do is look at ChatGPT for this first part. So I'd like to open up with this question. How are you currently using generative text-based AI or ChatGPT?
Thanks, Matt. I've opened up the question box again. I'm really keen to find out how some people are using ChatGPT. Stick your answers. I can see we got Lynn is responding within there, and a few other people. There's more people writing down as well. I like Alan's comment in the main chat as well, talking about using different AI. It speeds up processes, and it gives me a starting point.
That's a really interesting one. Just the blending of AI programs and softwares and about how they can support one another, I think is a big one.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, as we were talking about that, there just dozens and dozens of responses have come through. So let's have a look here. What have we got? Emails, summarizing large volumes of text, report save time. Absolutely, Lynn. That's exactly how I use it. I post transcriptions of podcasts through it and then get a summary, and it works wonderfully well. Which is again that Liam, the point, paraphrase text and change the tone to suit the intended audience, turning bullet text into full bullet points to full text or vice versa. That's a really interesting idea, Eleanor. I might have to play with that. That's an interesting one. Creating data for Excel, says Donna. Brainstorming ideas, says Lynn. And using it periodically to help reword certain things, says Rosemary. Which ones stand out for you from what people are saying there, Matt?
It's the comments that think about that end user. It's how can we activities for learners to engage with. Anne mentioned it. Yeah, using it to support wrong answers for quizzes. I think that's one I always actually struggle with. Is multiple choice questions have been around in e-learning for a long time, and they're tricky to kind of get correct. Now, not always a fan of them, but clients like them. But giving really ones that make you think. Activities for learners to engage with. We've seen as well. Brainstorming tools. I'm a massive fan of that, and I think it's something to bounce ideas from as well. I'm having a look down the list. There's some nice ones as well from obviously from graphic designers. Photoshop, animation, audio enhancements, coursework with a smiley face. We're not there to that's a whole other question on education, but there's just so many nice ways of currently using it. It's just not limited to what we think is something to play around with.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Nadine says she doesn't use it, and then we've got Lisa saying this is some really interesting ideas to help write wrong answers for questions. I think that's a really interesting challenge and way of using it. Lots around summarizing information, a support tool, says Joanna, as part of a SaaS tool. A tool to help with content, says Paul. Finding solutions for complex Excel problems. So we've got Gareth using it to support things with Excel the other way around. And Andrew and a couple of others have said, Andrew Small, this is as a brainstorming tool to generate and rule out lots of ideas quickly. There's interesting in terms of that creativity part. Is it going to limit creativity? What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
I think, and again, just linking back, there are fears that we can become over-reliant on it. But I think we need to ask ourselves, we are learning and design specialists. We understand theory, we understand how to apply learning. But I think sometimes, especially in my role, when we work with different clients, it's that we can become so focused on content creation, and it could just be writing out a scenario. It's not something that's going to necessarily benefit the learning. I have thought that we need a scenario here, but AI has allowed me to kind of get a good starting block on what that scenario is based on the content provided, and it can do it instantly. It can do it in a blink of an eye. I can feed it some content. It's recognizing the patterns and the words that it's using and I'm using, and then it's creating that narrative for me. But I still understand that I need a narrative. I still understand that I need to apply something that's going to allow the learner to wander forward, to want to learn. Essentially, that's what we're here for. We want learners to want to learn, and AI is just allowing us to do that a bit quicker.
Absolutely. And again, wisdom of crowds. Yeah, you and I have got ideas about how we use it, and then we've got loads more ideas being shared within the text. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to move the display back down, so we're going to lose those answers, for now. However, as I said before, come back to the recording and you'll find all of that text there. So you'll be able to have a look at it afterwards. So if there are particular ideas you think, I'd like to have a look, who said that? Find the person's name, connect with them, and then find out how they are using it. And this is how we learn stuff. We learn from other people as much as we learn from the tools and how people are using the tools.
Definitely.
Matt, back over to you again.
Thank you. Yeah, just to kind of, before we move on as well, for us to learn, we must play, we must experiment, and we must find something that allows us to explore that functionality without limits. And just as a sort of a small, just an introductory piece about, how I became familiar with ChatGPT and generative AI is actually I asked it to start writing silly songs and poems and raps, because I thought, this is a fun new tool. I'm going to play around with it. I'm going to be silly with it because it's there. And only by doing those silly things did I actually start understanding, well, actually, there's a lot more that this can do. It can't just, continually churn out a country and western song with lyrics. It can't continuously turn out poems. It's able to understand my prompt and do something with it. And I think that's if we're having fun and we're learning, then that's a success in my eyes. So we have a small sort of animation video about ChatGPT in action for those who are not familiar with ChatGPT. Unfortunately, I don't think the video on this slide is currently working unless I'm going to go back. The video is not currently working through this, but what you would see on screen is you would see me entering a prompt, and that prompt would then pick out the key terminology, the words that I'm using, and it will allow it to build out a scenario. So for my prompt, I actually asked it to create an induction plan for new starters at Omniplex Learning, and it was able to do it so quickly. And it's not perfect, but it's definitely a good start. And I liken it back to when I was at university in the early 2000s. Of my instructors were saying, never use Wikipedia. It's a good place to start, but never ever use it as a source of reference. And I think artificial intelligence is a way of doing that. It's a good starting block. It's a good position for us to bounce ideas and to get ideas about the moving forward. And this it very quickly generates a plan. Is like I said, it's not perfect, but it allows you to kind of like create a flow. And ultimately what it will then do is, if you're not happy with that response, you can get it to regenerate it and regenerate it again and again and again. And for those who haven't used it, I'd strongly just suggest after this session, go away, create a login, try it out. Try out by writing a rap or a poem or a song or whatever you want it to do. Write a book. Try it, just experiment with it, because you'll be amazed at what it can really do. But here's some use cases. Now, we could fill an entire session on every single one of these use cases, but ultimately, you understand what you need ChatGPT for. It's essentially there as a means of consolidating time, budget, and resource. It's a means of saving and making more of our time as well. We don't have to sit there for hours reading content, digesting that content, understanding that content. We can allow AI to do that, and we can allow it to support our generation of content as well. We've been trying to use the 80-20 rule, and it's okay, sure, but sometimes it doesn't give me enough information, but it's a good start. And it's a method about asking ChatGPT to share 20% of the most important knowledge to learn about the topic, and then understand 80% of it. Again, not perfect, but you can then refine it and you can perfect it. And then a big one for me as well is storytelling. Now, I'm a massive advocate for social learning and storytelling within learning. I think narrative is a key part of wanting learners to continue and learn. And bringing narrative to a theme of otherwise dry content is vital. We could have content on cybersecurity or GDPR, something that's needed on a yearly basis. But if we can bring a narrative and bring empathy and a bit of humor to it as well, then you're going to really be leveraging learning. And just as an anecdote as well, I have a 15-month-old son, and storytelling with my son is a big part of his understanding and his growth. And I've been using it to create new stories. I've been using it to, come up with prompts. There's a lizard, there's a castle, there's such and such, and you give it prompts, and it allows it to build this world around you that I think it is an interesting point of topic. It's can we use it in our day-to-day lives just as something fun? And again, from a work perspective, as a learning designer, my role revolves around using it and writing it, and it's become a brainstorming buddy. We bounce ideas, I condense content, I improve content. Some of the excellent examples that came through on chat. There's so much we can do, and there's so much I still don't do, but it essentially frees up my time to focus on the correct implementation of learning theory and understanding. And again, that understanding of ChatGPT comes through prompts, and prompts are a vital part, and it's about tone and expectation. And clients are very clear with what they want in their learning. They want their learning to address through tone of voice, although often it's a marketing piece as well, the tone of voice, but it plays a large part in how we can use AI to support. And there was that question as well that came through that answer that came through from the question about how we use it. It's an excellent way of converting tone of voice. It's specific and descriptive, and it can at times avoid ambiguity if we are very clear and concise with that. And then finally, we can tailor and refine what we get from it. We can ask it to do more. To do more with what it's giving us. We can get it to turn it into bullet points. We can get those bullet points turned into paragraphs. We can really start chunking down content in a very clear and concise and instant way. Something that could take us 10, 15 minutes takes a matter of, less than a second. And yeah, I can't reiterate it enough. Practice, practice, practice. Learn, become comfortable with it, and then start thinking about how we can apply it and leverage that. Now, I mentioned brainstorming buddy, and I know that there were a few answers as well talking about brainstorming, bouncing ideas, but just as an example as well, we fed a prompt about acting as a learning designer. Now, that word act is such a vital aspect of that, and I've got another example as well, which I'll share after this. But to come up with a cybersecurity training module for a London-based law firm, which includes a unique theme and is no longer than 15 minutes. And it was able to produce 5 very different sort of examples of that. And they're all location-based. They give it a sense of place and time, and it's relatable to those who are going to be conducting that. Now, we've got so many people from so many other countries, across Europe and the world, and it's there and it's able to do that. And you're going to see some quite, I find, funny examples later about what it thinks Windsor looks like and what it thinks people look like as well. But again, it's evolving, it's changing, but it's allowing us to create 5 pretty good examples here about a learning scenario that would take me, I don't know, a few days, weeks, who knows, to create and think and ideate. And it's such a powerful tool. I just can't, I can't thank it enough. I can't thank AI enough, because it's been a lifesaver at times. Which leads us on to another little thought. Is AI really our friend? Is it there to really help us? Now you can see on screen there's experimentation, understanding, and trust. And some call it a virtual assistant, some call it a brainstorming buddy, some call it a virtual, what it is. But do I understand it? And it links back again to morals and biases in question, and it's how to best use and utilize. But the redeeming factor is the time we have for experimentation. I think if we can experiment, and continual practice and trial and error, we hope to be able to eliminate those fear factors. We need to experiment in order to build trust and understanding, and hopefully we can then become comfortable with using it and knowing what that final outcome is. We always need to remember, what is that very final outcome? Who is going to be absorbing this information? And if I don't understand it, and I still don't understand it when it's gone through generative AI, then why are we using it? What's it there for? Because we can continually create content. Now, I've called it a friend. This is a bit of a poor attempt at a tenuous link. But if there are friends in here who are, if there are fans, here of Friends, a part of our trialing and experimentation was to feed it the US sitcom script for the final episode of Friends. And what it was able to do, it was able to understand the content and the context of the episode. And for fun, we were trying to create a multiple choice questionnaire about it. We've seen this through social media. People have been playing around with this idea about AI and generated curated content, but it allows us to understand and reflect on, an entire, tens of thousands of words of content to generate questions or to generate new ways of thinking or to collaborate with it. And I think, that's again, something to be mindful of is, and, we work with clients as well where we can't feed it the content through generative AI. When we ask it intelligent questions to think about the ways in which we're, absorbing that information personally. This is just for fun. And I can't stress it enough that have fun with it, especially if you're not familiar with it. Even if you are familiar with it, just start doing things that you're not usually typical with. Like, yeah, I use it as well. And I've seen people say using it to write emails and responses, but it's there to be something else. It's there for us to practice and experiment with as well. Which leads us on as well, again, to the use of ChatGPT and learning the flow of work. Now, I keep talking about that final outcome, about who is this learning really for? And if we're not making it immediate, and if we're not making it reactive to the learner and giving it them there and there, then we need to think carefully about how we're using it. Now, I've put this down into 3 steps, and I think this was valuable. Is the industry question of how does the L&D industry keep up with ChatGPT? And there's a scramble surrounding the integrations and implementations of AI. But then how do we keep up with ChatGPT? An early and still relevant perspective is that there's too much content being generated. I can go out there right after this session and just churn out content after content, PDFs, scripts for podcasts, videos, poster designs, whatever that might be. But there's too much. We can create too much content, which leads to cognitive overload. And pulling information from an endless source, users have the potential to create unlimited learning sources, and ChatGPT is evolving and developing rapidly, but it's still up to us to understand its limitations and its outcome. And remember that final step is learners. How do our learners keep up with this? Without leading to cognitive overload through misuse and pushing out learning at rapid speed, to understanding how we should best use and utilize learning, we could be setting ourselves and our learners up for failure. And I think that is something that we really need to consider, is how do we make it instant? How do we make it reactive to the learner? Now, what we've got at Omniplex Learning is we've got an Omniplex guide. Now, we've started to trial and we're starting to experiment and we're starting to use this as a function. And unfortunately, again, the video isn't working, but fear not, because I'm about to explain what happens in the video. But essentially, Omniplex Guide is a tool that sits across and on top of systems training. And through use of generative AI, such as ChatGPT, we can actually create scripts, we can create content, step-by-step outlines of how to use a particular system, particular software. And it doesn't take an expert to know what prompts to ask it, which order to do it in. It's about getting the right content to the right person at the right time. Now, having a background in education, there's a theory, the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, that if we're not reactive with the content that we give people, that we can forget it very instantly. But this eliminates that need. This eliminates that perspective. That they can jump from being in the moment of work to having a helpful step-by-step guide and a helpful tool about how that supports that journey. And again, the joys of this, and I guess from a wider business perspective, there's no technical skills required, so anyone can create those guides. It's just still about understanding that learning theory and that learning need about instantaneous learning for our learners. We're not just creating PDFs. We're not just creating videos and audio files and posters. We are creating content that is instant for the learner. Now, this video that's on screen, unfortunately, is the wrong video. And this is a sneak peek for one later.
Let me fix this. Let me fix this.
No worries.
I put the wrong one on. There we go.
No worries.
Let me find the right one. Apologies, everybody.
But yeah, whilst we're waiting,
Here
sorry.
we go.
Thank you, Andrew.
There you go. That should be working now.
Brilliant. If you've got any thoughts about kind of, how you blend that instantaneous in the flow of work, learning with ChatGPT, then please tell me about it, because it's still something that I'm becoming familiar with and becoming natural. Not natural. I'm never going to be natural with it, but something that I'm going to be becoming more, I guess, familiar with. And I just saw here as well, from Kelly, it's about IP of the content and who's liable if generative AI content is published. That's again, we work with clients that we can't put this content there. But I still think, just from understanding content and, where we can then, have that cognitive processing of understanding the content, we can still ask ChatGPT and generative AI to support us in some of that heavy work of activity, for example. I still think there's a need there of something, and as well, who essentially owns it, and again, that's up for debate. And again, ask your internal powers that be. But if you're using it responsibly and you're being careful, it's about understanding. It's still essentially understanding learning. We're learning experts. We need to be mindful of that. And thank you for that video, Andrew. But yeah, sorry, what you did see on screen was that Omniplex Studio guide sitting on top of a Salesforce piece of software. It's instant, and I think that's the key. It's that, yes, we can create content, but if it's just sitting there and it's going to then be read by somebody and then it's going to be used weeks later, then it's still not effective learning. And it's still a discussion we have continuously. Moving on though, we're going to just summarize those limitations. Now, I think it's vital because we're going to soon move on to onto the next little step, but there are still issues surrounding copyright. There are still limitations surrounding the text and text out, what it actually creates for us and in that moment. And of course, the big limitation is still that it's tied at the cutoff point of September 2021. And again, it doesn't truly understand the content. It still doesn't really know what it's doing. We are the one who are feeding it the prompts. We are the ones who understand the learning theory and the learning needs. and what that outcome needs to be. Because if we're just chucking content in without a thought, then we're not going to get effective learning. And probably as well, it's that fear of the inaccuracy of data, the potential for bias as well, like some of those examples we heard at the beginning. And that's something to be mindful of. Now, we're going to move swiftly forward through imagery. Now, I am not a graphic designer, and I hope to do the graphic design, our internal graphic design team justice, as I talk very swiftly about how amazing AI is at generating imagery. And you know, we don't need people to create images. Of course we do, but you know, it's bizarre. And again, this is through nothing but play, but image generation. Now, we fed Midjourney this prompt of creating a modern and minimalist sketch illustration. Now, we wanted to brand it. We wanted to try and create something that we could use and utilize. And I think it's pretty powerful stuff about how quickly this was done. This was done in a matter of seconds. The ability to read our prompts and to create something effective. Now, what we also see in DALL-E, which is now just completely outdated with DALL-E 3, is the same prompt, the exact same prompt, but it's creating it in a very different and unique way. And it's again pulling that content from source material that's been fed into this machine. And what I think is most powerful about it is that it's again a useful tool for coming up with ideas and brainstorming and thought about, it's taking that early legwork in as well about it. About how we can start coming up with concepts and proof of concepts as well, possibly. And then we jump forward a little bit more into a super realistic image of a diverse group of people attending a fun training course. Now, the middle one in particular, I think, is just terrifying. They think that's what fun is, and that's what they think super realistic means. And remember, again, this is Midjourney's idea that people have these terrifying smiles. These smiles, there's an air of what's the term? The uncanny valley, that these people look real, but they're not. And that's still, I think, the limitations of AI. And you've seen it. And I actually took a slide out yesterday, and I kind of wish I hadn't. But we had a social media perspective of Lil Michaela, and I recommend it. And I thank Lena for pointing this out. And I just had the epiphany this morning, that they're becoming marketing tools. They're becoming means of pushing learning. And I think that is a new and also quite, from someone who doesn't understand graphic design, quite a terrifying perspective, which then leads me to question, why are we accepting, and why is it more commonly accepted, of generated text versus generated image? Now, I know that there's IP involved, but there's been a big kind of like uproar about what is generative AI doing for image. But we seem to be accepting that of text. Yes, sure, like I've created a prompt and it's coming out with this content, but it's an interesting study in image versus text, or visuals versus text, to put it sort of more precisely, because it's also lending itself into video as well. This one as well is brilliant. Super realistic or super terrifying. Like, it's still learning. It's still learning, and that's what I can put it down to. But again, it's that prompt, super realistic image, diverse group, fun training course, high-tech office. This is what it thinks things look like. It doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have an understanding. It's stereotyping. It's pulling ideas together to present them how we think we should absorb that information. Now, anyone here from Windsor, or anyone here from the UK familiar with Windsor, can tell you that this does not look like Windsor. This looks like a scene. I'm a fan of castles, and when I saw that this was in the presentation slide, I wanted to give Lena a big hug, because castles are, if I go abroad, I love a castle. But this is a castle from Game of Thrones. Look at that. It thinks this is what turrets look like. This is what it thinks it's structured like. This is what it thinks a UK-based street looks like. This is its, wow, I'm going to create the beautification of UK. Now, of course, it doesn't look like this. And I implore you to Google what Windsor Castle looks like, what the streets of the UK look like. It's not, we are not still living in the 1950s. This is 2023, not 2024. I actually had to double check and actually had to have a look at the calendar. But this is 2023. And again, this is Midjourney, but DALL-E has created this. Slightly more believable, slightly more symbolic of a high street, maybe. But again, it's pulling that data, it's pulling that idea of what it thinks, that particular street in Windsor looks like. And it's giving us an idea. It's giving us this flow of what we think we should be doing with it. Now, again, there's no right or wrong way of using it. And in fact, I would actually argue that it's probably a nice way of brainstorming and creating content. Now I'm going to show you something that we created for a client from our incredible graphic design team here at Omniplex Learning. This was for an Aztec training course on anti-money laundering. And there's careful consideration into UX, UI, about that learner experience and how it's been created as a gamified experience with a narrative and a story. Now, this was created a couple of years ago now, before we used ChatGPT to generate text and image and video. And it's so refined and it's so perfected. Now, what we then did is we fed those images through to recreate imagery based on a number of prompts. And it starts to identify what it thinks it should do. Now, what was interesting is 2 days ago, I was having a conversation with our lead graphic designer, Tanzil, and he actually started to, he liked what it was doing with pop colors. He actually found that quite inspiring about what this AI was doing, because he hadn't thought about it. It's and as a learning designer who writes, uses text, there's things sometimes that AI will come out with that I just hadn't thought of that allows me then to snowball those ideas. Now we're going to move swiftly through to audio. We've heard so many use case studies about it, about transcribing meetings, about dictating content as well, and removing background noise. They're so valuable and they're time savers. This type of software as an assistant, it's so good and so clever about just allowing us to focus on our task rather than creating the minutes that we need from a meeting or the need to continually write or type. It can dictate, it can give us ideas, and it can be instantaneous. Now that's valuable. And I'm sure there's so many ways of utilizing that I still don't know, and that you might know out there as well. And I please implore you, if you've got some incredible ideas about how you use generative AI, add me on LinkedIn, add us all on LinkedIn and share with us, because we learn through communication and we learn through social discourse as well. This is an example from Well Said Labs. Now, again, I'm not sure this video is working, this audio is not working, but this is generative AI through through voice. It's becoming far more natural, far more human-centric as well. And it's just starting to blend that reality of what is real and what is not. And I think, there's a power to this, and it frees up time. And of course, we're far past the days of robotic sounding VO, even though there are instances of it. But this is just lending itself to, the ways in which marketing works, which is a form of learning, this marketing campaign of pushing forward and getting a message out there and getting people excited about learning. It just frees up our time as learning developers and learning specialists. We don't need to chase down people to record all the time, even though that's, again, another quandary about VO artists as well. And that's another discussion. But you're never going to be better. It's never, I don't want to say this, but I'd like to think that it's never going to be as good as a human. But we're seeing so much progress already, which then leads us into video. Now, Andrew, if you could play that first video you had up for us. We have in partnership with Vion Go. Now, if you're familiar with Vion, then brilliant. Now, Vion Go is a fantastic tool. Now, what you're going to see on screen is that we can enter a prompt in the topic field, which pulls out that content from ChatGPT. Again, remember September 2021 as a limitation, a cybersecurity module for a UK-based law firm. We can give it a vibe, we can give it a format, we can give it a layout, we can give it a tone of voice and language so that it's a global piece of software that's allowing it. And in about 20 seconds, it can create a 1-minute video that is, again, a super incredibly powerful and important starting block for us as creators, because we can think about the prompts, we can think about the ideas, and it will just create it for us. And then what we can then do, as you'll see on screen, and that's how quick it was, it's going to load that video script, it's going to put a VO over the top of it, but we can fine tune it, we can tweak it, we can adjust it, we can give it that human level QA that I think is still vital with AI. And then we can go into the back end of it and we can actually edit it frame by frame, scene by scene, which again, you'll see very shortly. But, if there's something that we don't like, or if there's a statistic, for example, that you see on screen, 60% of businesses breach, we don't know if that's true or not. We do our research, we do our additional reading, we then come back to it. But there's so many new instances, especially, about making it instant for the learner. And
did you know that 46% of businesses reported a cybersecurity breach in 2020?
I'm hoping you can hear that, but that's how the VO sounds. Still slightly robotic, but we are, there's those steps forward, and that, to me, just every time I see it, just blows my mind about creating Vion-based video content. And again, all it relies on is a prompt. It relies on an understanding of learning to be able to use that instantly. Thank you, Andrew. So just to sum up on this whistle-stop tour of AI, remember, we are continually evolving. This is a continually evolving process. And just like we saw this morning, you become familiar with something and then it changes rapidly. And Donald Taylor actually came out the other day, and I thought it was so vital to this message, that today AI is at the lowest quality it will be. It's not going to get worse. It's just going to get better and better and better. And there's so much that we still need to understand. We need to experiment, we need to practice, and we need to play. And I think we can become so absorbed in our own echo chambers of what we think good learning is. And especially with things like, remote working, when you work in isolation, it just allows another tranche of social interaction. We can explore what's out there, we can become good at it. And simple integration is often the most effective. Always remember that learner is that center of attention. The learner is that end message, that end goal. And we are just the stepping stones to get there. And through use of things, and I've neglected to mention things like Grammarly as well. My spelling, my punctuation in grammar is never that great, but Grammarly, I always assumed it was just there. But it's a form of AI. It's an incredibly powerful tool, something to be mindful of, but it's something to be incredibly excited about. And thank you so much for attending today, and for the incredible questions as well, and answers. And thank you.
I for one, thank you very much, Matt. But I, for one, am not welcoming our AI overlords to take over voiceovers. Yeah,
I know. I've got some friends who are VO artists, and I do genuinely think there is a fear there, and it's to be founded. But like you said, Andrew, you've got the voice of radio, you've got your your tone of voice. It's just, you can't replicate things like that. You can't replicate human VO, and we're seeing this as well within the wider industry, within America, with what's going on with strikes. And I know that's a whole other topic of discussion, but at what point does it stop? At what point does it end? Absolutely. AI is there as a tool. It's not there as a means of replacement. And I think we need to understand that. But at the same time, I completely understand the need to be mindful of that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt. The chat was going backwards and forwards, and it was really interesting just to see the different comments that people were making relating to the things that you were saying. It was definitely triggering people to think about different things. And the Q&A, there's a long conversation going on in the Q&A about which tools. Thank you, David, for responding to the questions that are in there. I know we're very slightly over time, but we're not going to have the opportunity to go through the questions. But again, brilliant. Again, thank you for people putting other potential options in there. I've seen Gamma has been highlighted in there. What else? Somebody's highlighted Tome as well as potential tools. So really do appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Matthew, your contact links are in for LinkedIn are in the box on the left hand side, and David's are as well, and me as well. So should you want to connect with us, please feel free to do so. As we said, there is a recording, and I would suggest go back through it. If you've got questions in there that haven't been answered, please do get in touch with Matthew. Please do get in touch with David. David, thank you for responding so well to the questions relating to the chat stuff, and the learning the LLM questions, and he's the person you need to go and speak to about that stuff. Thank you very much for joining. Really do appreciate your time today. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time when Don Taylor is going to be back. He's going to be facilitating the sessions because I'm doing 1,001 other things with 1,001 other people. But just easy to say thank you once again, David. Thank you once again, everybody, for your participation. And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.